she says about those teachings that are usually called utopian. Right? The most important of these are his predictions that under conditions of a socialized humanity, the state will wither away, and the productivity of labor will become so great that labor somehow will abolish itself. Uh, so Arendt is critiquing this Marxist idea that history will resolve itself into communism, and in that resolution we'll find something like utopia, where labor will no longer be necessary and where the state itself will no longer be necessary. Um, and I mentioned in one of the videos about Nietzsche last time this idea of the last man, right? Nietzsche's greatest fear is the complete domination of universalism, where where people no longer see themselves as individuals, but as all being more or less, or all being equal, and all being subject to the same universal laws, to have lost any individuality and any of their unique spirit, to be uh, completely conformist. And this is, it seems, um, while Marx um, is not opposed to individuality and uniqueness and people, Marx does believe in this universalism. And it seems that that Nietzschean fear of the world of the last man is something along the lines of what Marx sees as the desired end of political history. So how does Marx think that labor would become unnecessary, that labor would abolish itself, and that the state also would abolish itself? Well, for Marx, both of the answers to both of these lie in the idea of technology. And Marx had a lot of faith in technology and believed that technology would be used in ways that it has not up till this point, but still might be. Right? We think of the presidential campaign of Andrew Yang, for example, was constantly warning us about the rise of automation, robots taking our jobs, and the need for government to provide for workers after robots have taken all their jobs. Well, Marx foresaw this and believed that eventually technology, right, robots, some kind of technical apparatuses would be able to do all labor, that labor could be done entirely by robots and technology, and therefore all labor would abolish itself. Now, obviously this has not happened, but this is something that people really believed through the first half of the 20th century, that we would create robots that would free us from labor. What we didn't foresee, although a Marxist critique of society certainly warned us of this, what we didn't foresee was that when those robots took over from the laborers, that those laborers would simply be out of the job and would not be compensated for that labor. It's not that they would continue to have a place in society, that the robot would not only replace their job, but replace their entire usefulness to society. The reason why this techno-utopia doesn't happen is because the government is not the one who is running the programs to replace jobs with robots. Right? If the government did that, perhaps right, the robot who doesn't need a wage, that wage could just go to the worker, the former worker. The robot would do the work for free, and the worker would get the money for not doing any work. Right? But instead, obviously, it's corporations who are replacing laborers with robots, and they have no incentive to continue paying the laborer, so they get free labor, and the laborer just loses their job. So, but Marx thought the way that labor would be eradicated would be through technology. But Arendt's critique here is that for Marx, because labor is the essence of who we are as human beings, it's the center of our political life, the contradiction she sees in this Marxist thought of labor eradicating itself is, well, after we've reached the society where we no longer have to labor, how will we realize ourselves in the Aristotelian sense? How will we flourish if we have no labor left to do? And the Marxist answer to this will be, well, we will put our labor to use in different ways. We'll choose how we labor. But Arendt's question, I think, stands, right? There's this contradiction at the heart of Marxist philosophy that the essence of being human means to labor, to work, and yet the goal of history and of communism is to prevent people from needing to work. So there's a kind of contradiction there. And how does then the state also wither away as history progresses toward communism? Again, the idea would be that the state would be essentially a piece of technology that would be able to run itself, right? A perfect bureaucracy, right? And this is what a lot of people, when you hear people complain about Soviet Russia, for example, one of the complaints was the bureaucracy, right? Just endless bureaucracy. And this is true. This is one of the challenges of Marx's conception of the state, is that it requires a very complex bureaucracy and would be largely operated by bureaucrats. Now, the benefit of this is if you have a perfectly running bureaucracy, those bureaucrats could be robots, could be AI, could be machines. The government could, in essence, run itself, right? A workforce made of robots producing goods that would be distributed by robots to people, and any sort of crises of state could be run in a technocratic fashion. There would be a sort of established ideology that would operate the state. There's the famous quote that Arendt mentions. I believe it's from Vladimir Lenin, one of the Russian leaders of the Russian Communist Revolution, who said that the ideal state should be able to be operated by a cook, any laborer, right? The state should work like a machine, and a machine that anyone is capable of operating. So it's in this sense that the state withers away. Arendt thinks this is a fundamentally flawed conception of politics. For Arendt, politics can never be understood as a machine. And technocracy itself is a kind of absurd idea. And this relates to her idea of, as I mentioned in the beginning, the idea of birth, of newness, and novelty within politics. For Arendt, politics is about, in an Aristotelian sense, discourse, logos, dialogue, and politics will always require this kind of discourse and dialogue, this kind of practical wisdom, which, as we know, is categorically different from technical knowledge, because there will always be new situations that need to be dealt with, that require practical wisdom, that require dialogue. And so politics can never be this machine. It will always require political thought, political expertise, and political dialogue. So that's one of, I think, the most important ways that Arendt differs from Marx in her conception of politics. And I think we can tie this also to Arendt's thought on totalitarianism. Why can't we have a totalitarian state? Because totalitarianism assumes that everything can be accounted for.